All right, so let's talk about how we even make a crown, right? And I know some of you may have some dental lab experience or been around the dental office for a while and kind of seen this process, but not so much from the lab end. And I know some of us haven't had as much exposure to kind of clinical dentistry. So this is going to be kind of a summary of how to make a crown. Just for today, I want you to just grasp an overview of sort of the main steps that it takes to actually go from a patient that has a tooth to the thing we call a crown that gets kind of cemented on it. Okay. And then what we're going to do over time is kind of fill in a lot of the little details. So we're going to break it up really in the 6 or 7 steps depending on the type of crown. So for today, and for the quiz, need you guys to know kind of the order of these steps. And kind of the more technical kind of details we're going to fill in as we go along. It's a lot to absorb all at once, so each week we'll kind of add on to it and just kind of layer on information. Okay. So that's the way we'll do it. So let's just kind of very simply describe how you make a crown, right? So you start with the tooth, and you take a big burr, and then you grind circumferentially, and a little bit on top. It's kind of like my hair. Just going to lop some of it off, okay? So grind all around, a little bit on top. Okay? So now what you're left with is a stump. And from now on, this stump of the tooth is what we're going to call a crown preparation. So we're going to teach you how to prepare a tooth for a crown. And there's different kind of criteria that we're going to have you hit. Okay. So once we've done that, the next step is to make a mold of what the tooth looks like. So similarly to what you did in class the other day, you're going to inject some of this really accurate impression material. It's a polyvinyl siloxane, and we're going to capture that contours of the tooth in this negative form. Right? So after we have that impression, the patient can, in a sense, go home, and we don't need to make a crown in the mouth while the patient's there, like you did for your direct resin or amalgam restorations. So this is an indirect restoration where we have a stone cast of what you've done to the patient's mouth, and you can do all this lab work while the patient's gone. So once you have this mold, you want to turn the impression into stone. So you guys have seen this before, right? Mix up some powder with some water, put it on a little vacuum mixer, and then put it in that negative that you had taken. And then once that's done, now you have upper and lower maxillomandibular casts. You want to put it onto an instrument that simulates the movement of the mouth. So we're going to have a whole lecture on this instrument, which is what we call an articulator. So that articulator simulates what your mouth does. Your mouth works on a hinge, but it can also translate and move. And we talked about these mandibular movements just a little bit in the sense that as we move the teeth side to side, some patients are in canine guidance, some are in group function. So we'll be able to dig into that a little bit more later on in the course. So step 3 is to mount. That's the proper term of putting the, let's go back. When you pour this impression into stone, what you're left with is what we call a cast. Okay, so we'll refer it now on as a cast. So cast, and then we need to mount those casts onto the articulator. Right. So now we got casts on an articulator, and now we're going to wax up the tooth. We're going to add and carve wax until it looks like a tooth. Okay, so you start with a stump, and you just layer on wax. And keep adding, take away a little bit until you kind of look like a tooth. And we got a series of video clips that we'll play in class that kind of, so you can see how this process is done. So wax up. Next thing, now you have this wax contour of the tooth. Now you want to pour what we call investment material around the wax pattern. And this is probably the hardest part to explain in words, so just let the video kind of explain it But you basically embed the wax in more stone. So once you have that embedded in stone, this part gets burnt out, meaning all the wax disappears, and then you have a void in the stone that looks like the shape of a crown. Now you heat up a bunch of this metal, get it really, really, really hot, and then you sling that into this void that you had created, and you get a piece of metal that looks like a crown. So we call that process casting. Okay. So let's go back. Okay. So step one, preparation. Right. Prepare the tooth. You're going to make an impression. You make an impression. You don't take an impression. So preparation, impression. You're going to mount. They're going to wax up, invest, and cast. Those are the steps you have to know.